Welcome to today's First Chesapeake Chat session. I am Akshita Ramesh, a First Chesapeake student, and I'm here to introduce the First Chesapeake Chats sponsored by Newport News Shipbuilding. I would like to thank this session's sponsor, Triangle, for making this chat possible. Just some housekeeping. We will let the speakers present and then open it up for discussion questions later on if there are time. But feel free to put questions in the comments throughout the chat and we will try to get to them all. The session today is how to set up for a not-for-profit 501c3 booster for your first team, presented by Team 2199, the Robo Lions. And I will now pass it over to our speakers, Rose Young, Prasad Karnakaran, Eric Wood, and Jim Stenglein to introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Rose Young, and I've had a nonprofit since 2011. Working with FRC Team 2199. It's a 501c3. It was quite an experience going through it, and I get asked questions about this a lot, so thought it would be a good opportunity to have a chat. So I invited some folks that I knew had also been through similar, if not exactly the same experience. So they'll introduce themselves, Prasad and Eric, and we're expecting to have someone join us who's with a Virginia team in a similar situation. Hopefully he can make it, Jim Stenglein, and we'll kind of tie him in there as if you can make it for this chat. And we're going to share some information if you have some follow-on questions afterwards. So Prasad?
Yeah, hi. My name is Prasad Karunakaran. I actually am the first senior mentor for Maryland. But besides that, I kind of sort of do full-time this nonprofit called Hackground. The way how I started with it is in 2010, I was a FLL junior coach for my youngest son. And then when my oldest son got into middle school, there was no robotics team, and the associated high school didn't have one. So I thought I should start a robotics club at the middle school so that we'll have a pipeline. So by the time my son gets to high school, there will be a robotics team at his high school. But anyway, long story short, trying to run a robotics club at the school had its own challenges, and I was in a situation where I had two businesses. One failed, one I was tired of, and I wanted to take a year sabbatical and figure out what's next for me. And I said, instead of just futzing around while the business side happens, let me start a robotics club at home. But I didn't want to get kids coming into my house and in the basement, and all sorts of stuff happens with that. So I said, hey, let me reach out to my friends who actually develop the community that I live and work in, and see if they have a basement to do something to teach some kids some robotics. And that's, basically FLL teams is what I started with. So sure enough, I said, I'll not knowing a whole lot, not thinking a whole lot into this. Said that year, I think IRS created this mechanism to create a fast track nonprofit status if you made less than 50K a year. So I said, that's all I need. I just need a little bit of donations here and there to do it. I went ahead and did it in 2.5 weeks, became a 501c, and next thing I know, I run into Ron Tyrion at a coffee shop. We're talking about FLL to FRC to, at one point I had one FRC team, 2 FTC teams, 7 FLL teams, and 3 FLL junior. I think that was a little trying to go more than what I could handle. Now we have one FLL, one FRC, 1 FTC, 4 FLL, and 4 FLL juniors. We can talk about benefits, drawbacks, and what advice I can give maybe as a group chat, but I do have some thoughts on it. But I'll pass it on to Eric to continue and do the introduction.
Sure. Hi, I'm Eric. I'm the lead mentor for the RoboBees and also the director for Growing STEMs, which is the RoboBees nonprofit down here in Southern Maryland. So I was a GACO alumni, and that's how I got started in FIRST. And I just moved for a job after I graduated school to Southern Maryland and found the RoboBees. Our situation is a bit unique. We actually started the nonprofit because we wanted to do outreach in the summer, and the school said no. So we thought, well, hey, if we have another organization that we can associate our students with, the school can't tell us no anymore. And so that's why Growing STEMs was started, and so that we could go to festivals and things and do outreach with the students. We also realized that given in time, there was a good chance that our lead mentor at the time was going to retire as a teacher, and that we may not be able to stay in the school. So we applied for the nonprofit paperwork for Growing STEMs, and 2011, 2012, and as a backup plan. And lo and behold, in 2015, 2014, our lead mentor retired. We got one more year in the school system before it just became too difficult. And then we left, and we're on our own completely in 2016. So that's where we're at now. We have one FRC team, 3 FTC teams, 4 FLL teams, and 4 FLL junior teams, all operating out of our STEM center here in Southern Maryland. So I'll kick it back to Rose and let you moderate.
Yeah, so I didn't give too much of the detail about how our organization was kind of set up. So we are kind of similar in terms of the number of teams. So we have the 1 FRC team, which I mentioned, 2199, but right now we have 2 FTC, about 8. I say about, we're a little vague on the numbers exactly, FLL, and about the same number of junior FLL. And that's because we're pretty dispersed in the community. So I know Eric has a nice facility, and Prasad has a nice facility, and we have a facility. It's a little smaller and not such a great facility, so it's not really big enough to incorporate all of our teams. I know a lot of the groups that are out there, the nonprofit specifically, allowed them to get some space, and that really helped with us for a while to have the standing for the nonprofit. We can talk about that as an advantage, but one of the things to consider is as you start to grow, you need space, and if you're not in a school, that becomes what you have to do, and it becomes kind of a cycle that I know you guys are all familiar with. Either you have somebody that donates very generously the space, or part of what you have to do is raise the money because you're paying for the space that you're using that you kind of took for granted that you had in the school system. So our path was a little strange. We were in a school, I was a teacher at the school, and we didn't have any space in school. So we found some loaned space. We did get donated space, but it didn't last. And in fact, we were at championship when I got a phone call that it gave me 2 weeks to get out, which was lovely. I had to start looking around, find other space. And that was close to the time that we said, hey, this is just not working, this loan space, and we rely on the school, and they can't really help us. So that's how, when it was about 2011, it was pretty easy at that time. And that dollar figure, that under $50,000 figure, that was where we were. Sounded easy. And the paperwork wasn't all that extensive. Got a board together, did the paperwork, boom, we're a 501c3. Today, I'm not sure. I've talked to other people that go through, the process has gone back and forth between being easier and not so easy to do. But when you're not talking about a high dollar figure, it definitely is going to always make it a little bit easier to get started. But what you have to realize is once you're in, then you have responsibilities to stay in. It could be that you have responsibilities to pay for space, to keep track of all this equipment, to answer to grant funders and folks like that. So one of the things that people ask about is, should I do this? Should my team do this? And that's a really tough question to answer. I thought we would start talking first a little bit about what are the benefits. We've said what made us go in this direction, needed to have the space, wanted to have the freedom, wanted to be able to work during the summer. So we've kind of touched on a couple. I don't know if you guys want to add anything else in terms of benefits of having a 501c3 that could sell this idea to folks, and then we can talk about what it costs you to do it.
I can jump in benefits wise. Everything what Rose said adds in, but I think from what I've before I started our own FRC team, we used to help a school FRC team, and that's Atherton High School. When during the winter, when it snows for 2-3 days, the school's closed, we would have them work at our space. And even when we had our own FRC team, we would still invite them to work, because during the 6-week build season, if you lose 4 days in a row, that's a pretty rough thing to happen. So that's definitely one of the advantages. The other thing I thought, when I talk to folks who run school teams, FTC and FRC, it's agile to make decisions. We want to buy something, I just throw it onto a credit card. Those are some of the easy things, decision making. We don't have to go through a whole process of school principal, school sponsor, then the boosters. Where does the money come from? Is it from the tech boosters or the PTA fund? I mean, all that kind of, we can cut through the red tape. I mean, there are drawbacks also. I mean, I don't know. Are we talking about drawbacks or are we talking about benefits right now?
But let's hit all the benefits first, because there are a lot of really good things, as you mentioned, the freedom to spend the money that hold your own purse strings. That's pretty nice. That flexibility is really pretty nice. Eric, you mentioned that you have time you don't have to work on the school calendar. You have other things, you have freedom to sponsor things.
Yeah. I think for us, the biggest benefit is we're just able to do what we want when we want to do it, right? And so my other mentors, they love to work. So none of us are teachers. We all work a normal 9 to 5 or 6 job, depending on the day, right? So they'll come into the shop and they come in whenever they want and they can work. And not just on FRC robots, right? So we do a lot of other projects in our shop. So a great example is what's going on right now is the whole face shield effort, 3D printing, and we're actually cutting some out using one of our laser cutter too. I've seen a lot of email on from the different first chats about how teams cannot get access to the 3D printers because they're locked in schools. We haven't had that problem at all. We can go in and do it in small groups and follow all the right guidelines. But that's huge. I've had students come and do own personal projects, STEM related projects in the shop over the summer. Hey, I want to build, someone built like a little electric powered go-kart, and that was really cool. So that's one of the benefits. I think one of the other big benefits we have is our ability to be agile with our team size. And what I mean by that, when we were in the school system, we were a larger team. We were like 35 students, all the way up to 60 students. The school bus was the right size. Our last year of the school, we were down to like 25-ish students on our FRC team. So the school bus was no longer the right size, and yet we still had to pay for a school bus everywhere we went. And for championships, it was either fly or take a charter bus. And so that's like a $12,000 price tag there. As soon as we left, all of a sudden now I can rent vans, right? And it cut my travel cost immediately. And so the ability to be scalable, however you want. And another way we're scalable is the reason my teams got smaller, FRCs, because I put more of the students in FTC, where in the high school, they didn't really want to have that many teams because they had to have more classrooms and more space and all this stuff they believe. So having your own space and having the control of your own organization allows you to do what you need to do. That's been the biggest benefit by far.
Yeah. Yeah, I went through something similar with the travel. We once had to go to a regional where we thought we would be able to drive 11 kids and some parents, and we're not allowed to do that. And the cost of the bus to go, it was in Trenton, was $3,000 all of a sudden within a month, because that was the rule, because we had to take a bus. So there were a lot of those things. I think that was probably the tipping point for most of our mentors, was the $3,000 for the bus. And of course, we weren't getting support from the school system to pay for it. They just turned around and said, well, you got ante up the $3,000. Because, well, you're giving us nothing here. Where are we going to get this money? So that tended to be the kind of thing that pushes you over. But now I want to look on the flip side of that. So those are some of the pros. But one of the first things we had to figure out, which comes with the freedom to do things, is liability. So I wonder if you guys could talk a little about, so for everybody who's now enthusiastic and saying, why doesn't everybody do this? I think that the number one thing to consider before you make this commitment, besides all the paperwork and the process, is that, with the school system, part of the rules is because they're taking the liability. And if they're not going to do it, you have to pay for liability insurance or find somebody who's going to cover you. So I know we have several liability policies, and we have a partnership with our recreation council that helps with some of the liability. But some days I really kind of worry about that. So where do you guys stand on that idea?
Oh yeah, it's a big problem. So we pay for liability insurance for both our facility and for our activities we do. And it's not too expensive a year. But you have to think about it. Everything you do, you have to think about. Is this the right thing to do? Is it something that we can get in trouble for? So a great example, once again, this year was we decided to close our shop down before school shut down, actually. It was, granted, it was only a day before, but we still have not allowed any students back in our shop this year because we can't, as an organization, justify allowing any student or participant in our programs into our facility when there's no need for them to be there right now. There's no competitions. There's nothing going on. And the big debate now and amongst our board is, when are we going to open back up? Because as soon as we open back up, it opens us up to liability again, especially if the virus is still out there. So, we like to think that none of our students would sue us if something happened. But as an organization, you have to protect the organization because they can sue you and they can very quickly take everything you have if you are held liable at all. So we have safety training for all of our machinery kids have to go through. There's very strict rules about who can open up the shop and how many mentors have to be in the shop before students can even be there or come inside. So it's quite often on a meeting day, if I'm the first one there and some students get there first, I'll make them wait in the parking lot until another mentor shows up, because there's a 2-mentor rule. There's a lot of, I took a lot of that for granted when I was working in the school system, right? You just fill out the form and gave it to the principal and you were done. It's totally different now and you're taking it all on yourself.
So I can talk a little bit about how our processes work. It may not be as stringent as how Eric mentioned. Like I said, we have one FRC team and one FTC team right now. They're the only ones who are probably there when I'm not around. And we have very few mentors. And all the mentors kind of know. And part of the drawbacks is, like, because I have very few mentors, I think sustainability and all that comes into factor. But we have a rule that a mentor should be there in the center before any kid can even show up and start working on something. We don't have it as written down the way how Eric mentioned how they run their shop. It's not because we don't want to, we haven't had the time. We're all stretching out, trying to do multiple things and multitask. So one of the things that we, during this COVID crisis, is while we are doing a lot of COVID response, we've got some of the kids to start working on manuals and things like that to put in place so we can probably create some structure. Liability-wise, I will tell you, I'm in a little different situation than probably Rose and Eric. I've got a very good sponsor who gives us 5,000 square foot of space. I asked them to give me a contract, and they said, you don't want a contract from me. Just use the space, because right now, the moment you have a contract, you have to go into getting insurance and everything else. Right now, you fall under our insurance. So Hackground is basically under Greenbaum Enterprises insurance right now. They specifically asked me, told me or suggested I not, and they know what I'm doing. They see what I'm doing. They believe in what it is. And Rose may know Owings Mills McDonough School. The owners is one of the owners of our building is a board member at McDonough, and he said, Prasad, what you're doing is amazing. I know it because I just authorized a $20 million building for Owings Mills. So for McDonough. So he specifically told us not to get into the whole contract, and also I can fall under his umbrella. So for me, liability comes under that. So I don't have that cost. But Eric, I'd like to hear, you said it's not a whole lot. How much do you pay a month or a year for your?
So our policy a year is, last time I checked, it was like $500 or $600.
Oh, that's not at all bad.
$1 million liability. It's $2 million per incident, right? So if
maybe I should ping you for your insurance agent, because I tried to call my State Farm and they don't want to touch it. They said the moment I said it's a shop, kids, they said, no, we don't want to do it. We don't work in that kind of insurance mechanism.
That's kind of challenging, because mine is like twice that. And we also, but that includes directors and officers. So I kind of want to bring up one other thing. before we get too close to the end here, and that is there's a structure that goes with 501c3s, and they're going to be a little bit different, but just to kind of go through the steps of what it takes to get the paperwork done, this might vary a little bit, but there are some minimums. You need to, in order to apply, you need to have some kind of an organization, probably a board that has some mission, that has, some documentation. You've got to show that you have some way of managing the funds. And there's some paperwork, as Prasad said, it can be very simple paperwork. If you say that you're not making very much money or you're not handling very much money, but there will be some amount of work that has to be done. We had a group of about 8 parents who wanted to do this initially that sat down, and someone had nonprofit experience and kind of helped us write up a lot of this paperwork and go through, these are tax forms, IRS forms, because one of the benefits we didn't talk about, which is I think kind of one of the obvious ones, so I didn't bring it up, but the obvious benefit here is that all of the teams that fall under our umbrella, whether they're working in our shop or not, can take donations that donor can then take a tax deduction, a tax write-off for. And that's all really great. And that's one of the main reasons that we want to keep this going. It does mean that you need to have some kind of an organization. And I personally am the treasurer. And I would say I spend average of 8 hours a week all year on the paperwork, because we have to file taxes. And unfortunately, about 2 years ago, our budget ran to closer to $80,000. So that's more paperwork. And I think Eric, you're in a similar situation where, you might have to get an audit, but insurance is expensive, but audits are ridiculous. So I have yet to be audited, but I'm really afraid of that because some of the larger grants you can apply for require those higher levels of financial supervision. So you kind of get your toe in at the under $50,000 level, but you have to be careful because you can kind of slide up. And at that point, the paperwork burden goes exponential.
It
so
does.
one of the downsides is somebody has to be willing to do that, or you get yourself into some trouble, and you can lose your certification because that stuff has to be done every year. We're talking the IRS here; they don't mess around. And then there's the state. Now, some people think, well, then at least you get your state tax. You don't have to pay state tax. Yeah, you do, unless you put in more paperwork to the state to get the state tax exemption. And then some places don't even take it until you put in their paperwork. So if you have somebody who's going to do the paperwork, it really helps a lot. But realize that you got to do that. And I think it's kind of a downside.
I will make one comment there. The federal process for us was fairly straightforward. The state process was the difficult part. And we are still learning things. I mean, we've been doing it for almost 10 years, and we're still learning things about the state process that we didn't know that we had to do. So just this, I mean, we signed up with 2 or 3 different organizations, the nonprofit for the state of Maryland. And we just found another one that we had to sign up for this year. And we're like, where were you guys at? And
Yeah, it's just endless. And that's so we were talking a little bit specifically to Maryland. I just found out that Jim is going to join us. Jim's with a team in Virginia. So if we could add, there he is.
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry I'm late.
No, that's all right. We were just talking about some of the paperwork requirements and the formalities of setting up 501c3s. You kind of sold the great aspects of all the freedom, and now we're talking about some of the less fun things like all the paperwork. And I don't know if you want to address either what you like or don't like in terms of how your team works or the paperwork.
Paperwork side actually was not too bad for us. I'll start out preface. Our booster was set up. This was actually our first full year. Would have been our first full year with the booster organization behind us. Talked about it for some time before doing it. And actually the largest influence to do it was the fact that we lost some or were denied some sponsorship money. They couldn't write a check to the school.
And you're with RoboHawks, right? So you and RoboHawks were with which school?
With Elsie Bird in Chesterfield, Virginia.
Okay.
And team has been around 20 plus years, so worked fine for a long time without a booster organization, but then realized, as I'm sure you've already mentioned, the many benefits. As far as paperwork and getting things set up and in line, I'd have to say, I'm sorry if it worked harder for all of you, but it went pretty smoothly for us. Granted, we did get a little help. We had an attorney who volunteered some time to look over and advise us in what we were doing. But from start to finish, it was probably 6 months.
Cool. So you had somebody else working with you. We had a comment come up that somebody mentioned that instead of starting your own 501c3, it is possible to work out something through a local community foundation. And most communities do have, and actually we try really hard to partner with as many community foundations and others that are already doing it as we possibly can. I in fact had first looked into doing that. We were not able, if we did that, to keep all of the funds ourselves. There was a little bit of a fee involved, but nothing is free, actually. But certainly it's worth being aware of other organizations that may take you in under their umbrella. I'm sure that's going to vary greatly across our region. I don't know if anybody else has any comment on local, say the booster club that already exists or another foundation. I mean, is that what you're saying, that there was a booster club that kind of took you in?
Yeah, I've heard about these local foundations who do it, but one of the reasons why I didn't want to do something like that was going back to one of my first comments about the benefits, how agile it is. I don't want to deal with someone else. I didn't want to have another layer in. And like what Rose said, there is a cost. They take a pass-through fee and things like that. So we just didn't. And to begin with, we don't have a whole lot of donations that come through. Whatever comes in just goes to the program. And having to add a processing fee on top of it was a little bit of a stretch for us. So it was easier for me to just do this. So that's why we did it.
The only thing I'll add is if you don't want to start your own, there was a team in West Virginia that we helped support that didn't want to start their own. So they just worked through us. And so,
yeah, I didn't do that. I've had a couple of teams who did it because one of the things I wanted to do is if we're getting money in, I've had teams who come to us asking for space. I'm a little bit of a brand freak. So if we are getting the money, we want it to be in it. It's probably my selfish way of doing it. But I put my heart and soul into it. So I just wanted to be within.
Absolutely. They have to follow certain things to be a growing Sims team. Yeah.
Right. So,
I think it's interesting. We are starting to get some comments, and I know there's a lot of interest in this discussion. We have recently started talking about education day sessions and other things that we could be doing going forward. It really does seem to me that there's an interest, and we've put up the contact information. So if there are other people who see this later or watching now and would be interested in a lengthier forum or putting some more information together, I think we'd really like to hear from you. I think we've put up most of our contact information, Jim. I don't know if we've shared yours. I don't get an opportunity to do that. Certainly would like to invite folks to let us know maybe other ideas that you have. And we're getting somebody watching out there. So that's awesome. This is terrific. I really would like to continue the conversation because I think we all have found that there's a great interest. People ask about this, want to know, and there's certainly a lot of ins and outs, and it's going to depend on your particular situation. So it's good to gather a lot of information before you jump in. And you're doing 8 hours a week of bookkeeping that you didn't think you were going to do because you're not a bookkeeper. But it's worth it. It's worth it, right? Is it all worth it?
Any tips if you want? I've outsourced my bookkeeping to India. So if anyone wants it, it's much easier. I don't deal with it. So anyway, back to you.
Maybe I just don't trust anybody else. I don't know. Talk about being a control freak.
I think we are out of time, right, Ashika?
I'll note that our board actually will completely change over in September. The initial people that were in with us and board members that started the 501c3 are all stepping back. So we'll get a new group come September. And that means obviously, new bookkeepers and new president, the whole shebang. But we feel the transition will be fairly smooth. That's one of the other things that we have is in the past we'd had a buyer, for lack of a better term, involved, and that was one of the primary motivations that I know of for having a 501c3, and that's to be able to purchase things without having to go through a lot of extra hoops, and that was made easy in our organization by naming someone as a buyer, and basically just they had a credit card and set up all online accounts so they could do that very easily, and that person is actually stepping back now as well, so there'll be a new person in that role, but overall the transition looks to be pretty smooth.
Well, good luck with that.
Another
I'd like
point
to touch base with you again later to figure out how you did that, because this is 14 years with the team, and I can't turn it over to anybody yet. So I want to find out how you got those people. So
well, yeah, a lot of times you fool them and show up to this meeting if you're interested, and
yeah, yank them in. Okay.
Tell them it's at Ruth Chris and everything's paid for, and maybe they're there.
All right.
No, actually, we have.
That's a different topic, mentor recruitment, right? So we had a different talk on that.
Correct.
I think it's on back to you.
Guys?
Back to you, right, Akshita?
Yep. Thank you guys so much for sharing all this information. I definitely learned a lot, and I'm pretty sure the audience has too. I would like to thank today's speakers, Rose Young, Prasad Karnakuran, Eric Wood, and Jim Steinglass with us today and sharing some interesting information. I definitely learned a lot, and thank you for teaching us all about this great opportunity. I also want to thank today's sponsor again, Triangle, and have a great rest of your day.